Blessings to one and all. I am Christ Am Disciple, as you can see by the name. And we're going to get it popping one time because it is time for us to really go into talking a little bit about DC a little bit with you guys. Because basically, you know, this. Okay, good. So, without further ado, I am Christ I Am Disciple. You're watching my channel. I said we're going to do a stream. We're doing a stream right now. And let's get into it. First thing, if you want to support the channel, in the chat section, you have a link. You can donate to me via PayPal. If you want to come in here and chop it up with me as a guest, you can do so. The link is also in the chat. Or if you just want to chop it up in the chat, you can do that. The format is simple. This is what we're doing. The name of this stream is Faith, Alfred Faith. All we have comes from the Most High, okay? I always start off with scripture. So we will be starting off with scripture. We'll talk about how the studio is hell-bent on copying the MCU. We'll talk about burn our accounts. We'll talk about restore the Snyderverse. Zack Snyder Justice League and IMAX and all the other hashtags that are out there. All the variations of hashtag, all the variations of what you guys are saying. And we'll also talk a little bit about Vero. I know I didn't put that in there, but we'll talk about Vero and a couple other things we'll talk about that I don't have written down here. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's get into it. The piece of scripture comes from Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6. And we're looking at verses 25. It depends. We may go 25 to 34. We may just go 20. Anyway, it's quite a lengthy scripture. So I'm going to just go through it. All right. So from verse 25 and however I feel, we'll keep it going. Right. So I tell you, do not worry about everyday life. Whether you have enough food to eat, enough water to drink, enough clothes. Doesn't life consist of more than food and clothing? Look at the birds. In fact, you can hear the birds in the background. Probably we can hear it in this video because there's lots of birds around. They don't need to plant or harvest or put food in barns because your heavenly Father feeds them. You are far more valuable to Him than they are. Can all your worries add a single moment to your life? Of course not. So why worry about your clothes? Look at the lilies and how they grow. They don't work or make clothing. Yet Solomon in all his glory was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God so wonderfully cares for flowers that are here today and gone tomorrow, won't He surely care for you, O ye of little faith? Faith, Alfred. Faith. All right, let's get into it. So I noticed something. I do agriculture. I plant. Okay, I plant a lot of plants and I get crops. And the crops, some of them I sell, some of them I give away. But as in anybody who's planting things, you will notice that there are all kinds of animals that feed off your crop, not just you. You're not the only sole person who's feeding. Now, you could use very powerful chemicals and keep everybody at bay, but I don't do that. I like to use more organic approach. So the chemicals I use are not harsh on the food, on the animals, or on me, because I understand, as you can hear the birds, I don't know if you can hear the birds in the background, I understand that everybody needs to eat. Now, you have to understand something. Animals don't plant stuff. Oh, they may plant by accident, by, like bees will take pollen and pollinate flowers, or birds may pick up seeds, eat the plant, the seed falls on the ground, and, by accident. Animals don't plant anything, people. Animals don't plant anything. All they do is reap. All they do is look for food and get it. Think about what I'm saying. Human beings are one of the very few animals. Some animals, they collect food and then they store some for hibernation, depending on what. They wake up, they have food, they store it, right? But only human beings, really, we are the only ones that plant crops and we plant stuff, right? Most animals don't do that. Now, in nature, if you leave something, okay, so if you leave a plant, tomato, whatever, right? In nature, animals will eat out a certain amount of the crop. Like, say, if you just let tomatoes grow wild, right? Bushes growing up all around them and everything. You're not cutting anything, nothing. You're just letting the wild stuff grow, right? You'll be surprised. You can go abandon the area. You had tomatoes there, abandon the area, and the tomatoes might still exist there because of the following. One, plants are self-sustaining. So even if we never farmed, there would be plants around, right? There'll be crops around, etc. But depending on what soil and so on, like if the plants are endemic to an area, that means they grew up there, they're naturally found there. You will find that you don't even need to plant them; they will grow on their own. And then when they bear fruit or whatever, animals will eat some of the fruit, and the seed will fall back on the ground, and it'll grow back. Isn't that amazing? So, and actually they grow healthier than if you were to cultivate them, which is even crazier. And the point behind this that I'm making is this. God, if you believe in God, if you believe in some higher being, some higher power that put all these things in motion, that being, that thing, that entity, whatever it may be, if it's an entity at all, put things in place to replenish itself. Plants have a natural sustaining power within them that they can replenish themselves. Animals don't replenish themselves at all. They have to get plants for sustenance or other animals for sustenance. But the animals naturally, in nature, they naturally is there. Unless we as human beings encroach on nature and throw off the balance, the cycle continues, right? Animals don't plant. They just reap. Isn't that amazing? And so imagine we have humongous animals. We have animals that are the size of buildings, okay? Skyscrapers. We have animals, well, not as big as skyscrapers, but big. Like we have animals as big as 100 feet to 150 feet, okay? Huge animals. And these animals are feeding off of plankton, krill. And you have to understand, they're not planting anything. They're just users. They're just consumers. And yet, there's always an abundance of these things because of the cycles that they go through. It's amazing what I'm saying to you. If you really put it into perspective, you wouldn't worry about anything. So, observing when plants, we we call them pests. There's many pests I have to deal with on a regular basis, but nature naturally deals with these pests as well. It's a point to what I'm saying. So it's a slow burn, but just bear with me. So that the pests only come out at a certain time. At a certain season, they come out because the situation and the conditions are ideal for them then. But in another season, they're not coming out. Snails, slugs, they come out at a certain time because the weather is conducive for them to move around. Blight, mildew, aphids, they come out at a certain time, right? But in the rainy season, you will not see aphids around because aphids or blight, because Rain falls so hard it washes the blight off the trees, off the crops. What I'm saying is everything has a balance with nature. It's amazing, you know. And similarly, what I'm about to tell you is all things go into a balance. All things. That's why we don't need to worry about what is going on with Warner Brothers Discovery. Not talking about Warner Brothers Pictures. Warner Brothers Pictures is separate in terms of, I want to address Warner Brothers Pictures separate to Warner Brothers Discovery. The head of Warner Brothers Discovery is David Zaslav. The head of Warner Brothers Pictures is Abdi and DeLuca. The head of DC Studios, James Gunn and Peter Safran. I know that David Zaslav oversees everything, but I would prefer to separate what his initiatives and what he's doing from what Abdi and DeLuca is doing, and even from what James Gunn is doing. Okay. The reason being because when I say the studio is hell bent on copying the MCU, I am particularly talking about James Gunn, Peter Safran, and David Zaslav. I'm not speaking about Abdi and DeLuca, even though they are overseers of James Gunn and Peter Safran. They're allowing them to do what they need to do. Maybe hire up David Zaslav as over, as tell them to report directly to him, so they already have nothing to do with it. The studio is hell-bent on copying the MCU, even though it has had very little success doing so. There are only 2 DCU or DCEU movies. It doesn't matter what you call it, because right now it doesn't matter. But there are 2 DCEU or DCU movies that have been successful copying the MCU format. The MCU format for movies is somewhat generic, but nonetheless, it has to do with comedy. It has to do with emotion, what we call humor and pathos. Okay? So the MCU movies, they go through a cycle of funny, serious moment with emotional impact, funny, serious, emotional moment, funny, and so on. They keep going back and forth like that. Similarly, if you look at the DC, let's call it the DCU. I know it's the DCEU. The DCEU is supposed to come to close, and James Gunn's supposed to start the DCU. But I'm going to call it the DCU because to me, all these movies are similar. Once you go from Justice League 2017 all the way down to what we have presently, and even into what James Gunn will be doing, and even when you look at the Harley Quinn things that's coming out, the Kite Man, series on Max, you see the same thing. This is humor, pathos, humor, pathos. What Jeff Johns would call it, heart, fun, and hope. I quite frankly think that some of these movies are not even made for them, but they still follow that format. So anyway, Mr. David Zaslav has certified that Warner Bros. Would pump in more money into the DCU. Now they're going to have 10 studio stages where they could shoot. So they've reserved money for that. Don't have money to pay the strikers. Don't have money to pay the writers. Don't have money to put Zack Snyder's Justice League into cinemas. Don't have money, surprisingly, to advertise Aquaman as they should, but they have money for that. Very well. So they're pushing. So David Zaslav is pushing, hell-bent, pushing hard on having James Gunn shape the DCU, have Kevin Feige, probably James Gunn talking with Kevin Feige, and they're pushing to shape the DCU. Good for them. You know what I'm saying? I really don't want to go into too much about that because I personally think that is the worst mistake they can make. I know they're trying to still force the issue of having the MCU crossover with the DCU, which is why they're called DCU MCU. That's a Marvel thing that's going on. Jeff Johns has been behind it since 2016, and this is where they're trying to go. So we all know this, okay? And they're still trying. They decide, oh, we are determined. We are determination. We will fail. Now, what I don't understand, but not my properties, right? What I don't understand is this. You're pushing for something which has cost you so far close to $1 billion, all right? You've had flop after flop after flop after flop. So you just let all these DCEU movies or DCU movies flop, okay? You let them all flop. You invest all this money into these sound stages and studios, and you're investing all this money into gun. Oh, crazy. This man has not one day offered you a cent, okay? He has not been profitable in any way with the DC franchise. And you are pouring in hundreds of millions of dollars into this guy, hoping that the next 10 years you'll have something because you think you're doing it right. Why is it that I am not perturbed by this? Because I have learned from nature, everything balances itself out. And the Most High supplies all our needs. We don't need a trip over this. We want the Snyderverse restored. You stay focused in that, you dial in on that, and that's it. There's not one thing we can do to add an extra gray hair to our head or take away one. There's not one thing we can do with certain scenarios which we can change. That's up to the Most High. He supplies scenarios. He takes away scenarios. We learn this now. We're living off of the Most High. So, me particularly, I'm not perturbed by that, and it doesn't change my resolve and my dedication towards seeing the Snyderverse restored. Doesn't matter what they say. Doesn't matter what they do. They've been doing this for the longest while. They said and they were hell-bent on doing certain things. Toby Emmerich and Walter Hamada and Jeff Johns did not want the Snyder Cut to see the light of day. Did not want it. Right? And the studio didn't want it to happen. And it happened. Okay? Which tells you the Most High is the one that supplies whatever it is, if you believe in a higher power. So I don't trip about nothing. And I wanted to let you guys know that these burner accounts that you see coming up, and you just look, pay attention. Every time somebody starts to respond in a weird way, click on the account and see when that person joined Twitter. It's the same person, but they reincarnated themselves in another burner account. Some of these people have 4, 5, 6 Twitter accounts. Okay? And I'm really truly convinced now that these people are not fans. They are executives. They are people in the industry. They are people who work in VFX and those kinds of things, or whatever. I also am convinced that there are not many of them. They're making themselves look like they're much more than they are. And it's to try and confuse the narrative, which I'm going to tell you guys right now, you need to block those burner accounts. So first thing you do is this: what you do. You say burner, and then you block them. You want whoever's coming after to know this is a burner account. It's not a real account. And you block them. Some of these burner accounts are saying that they're dated back to 2009. Some are saying they're dated back to 2012. But when you go to the account has nothing under it. There's nothing streaming under it. And that should tell you something, that this is some backup account that somebody has that they pulled. It might have been since 2009, but it was a dormant account and they went back to that account and used it. So I want you guys to pay attention to that, because a lot of the discussions and a lot of the stuff that's going on Twitter, particularly, it's burner accounts. Okay, they've been around since this year. A lot of them, I've seen it over and over again. So heads up on that. Before you even respond to the person, don't be tempted to respond to the person. First, click on their profile and you're watching for two things: how much activity they have, how many followers or who they're following. And then also you want to look at the date in which they're coming in Twitter. And you'll notice it's the same set of people over and over again. We, who are fans of Zack Snyder, represent a humongous set of people who come to see DC films. We really do. We speak what a lot of people agree with. And as of late on Twitter, I've been seeing a lot of new faces and a lot of new people. And I didn't know these people were following me. I didn't even know these people knew about me. And now they know I'm an OG and I'm an OP and all of this stuff. And they start talking like that. So what I'm trying to say to you guys is, don't engage with burner accounts. Just don't do it. But do let other people who are watching or who are going to come here, let them know, ID that person and let them know that's a burner. Don't go there. It's a burner account. Don't even engage them, right? So that everybody else will know and they just won't bother with it and they can use their time for something better. So I think this whole thing's going to play out just the way how it's going to play out. And I'm not worried about it anymore. I used to be, but then I think about even, I think about my life. I think also about how things played out in Zack Snyder's Justice League, the movie itself, how things worked out, even though Batman, it looked like Batman was up against it to get the team together, and then it all worked out. And even down to the last minute of their struggles, you know, Flash had to turn back time. It looked like all was lost, and it still came through with it. And to me, this is the kind of movie that simulates life. And this is the same thing happening right now. It looks like, you know, WB has the upper hand because obviously they're not going to sell the IPs to Netflix. They have no plans of selling it to Netflix. That's not going to happen. But the light at the end of the tunnel was the Abdi and DeLuca thing. Now, Abdi and DeLuca might be in agreement with James Gunn about, you know, how to move forward, whatever. But what I would say is that I think if we have any shot at anything, it's going to be with them. You know, their ideals and all of that, you know, match up to it. So what am I saying to you guys? You guys need to, there's something I would wish we could do as fans, which is all the people, if we're going to do it, we could do it on Twitter, we could do it on Instagram, TikTok, we could do it on YouTube, whatever. But here's the important thing. I want the company to see how many of us there are on social media. And I don't think they have a good idea. And somebody needs to do a roll call. But even if you do a roll call, that's not enough. There are vocal ones of us that talk all the time, every single day. We're there, we're going. Okay, that's not a whole lot of us. But if everybody were to come down and everybody were to converge on Twitter or on YouTube or wherever, and they could see the magnitude of how many of us there are. And I'm not just talking Snyder fans. Also, I'm talking the general audience that doesn't even know about all of this that's going on. Just to know that they also would want the Snyderverse to be restored. You know, because anybody who's watched Zack Snyder's Justice League is going to be like, okay, so when is the sequel coming out, right? Because it ends on a cliffhanger, right? So anybody in their right mind has, we have, for me to put this way, first of all, as a DC fan, the fact that we even got the Justice League, and that they were facing down with Darkseid. These are the two biggest properties of DC. Darkseid and, you know, Apocalypse and New Genesis and the New Gods, and then we got the Justice League, right? Those are just the biggest known IPs of DC, period. Okay? Who in their right mind would say no to continuing that? No one, right? Especially how well represented they were and how well done Zack Snyder's Justice League is. So there are going to be very, very few people, maybe weirdos on Twitter, but very few people are going to say no to continuing that. Very, very few people. Further, very, very few people who have seen Zack Snyder's Justice League, very few, would not dash to the nearest cinema or the nearest IMAX or the nearest Dolby Digital display theater to see this movie on the big screen. People will just go just to see it on the big screen. And the fact that it would be an event, it would be historic. The fact that it's a long movie, that means it's 2 segments, there's going to be a break in between. That used to happen back in the day with cinemas, where you may go into the cinema to watch 2 movies, and then there's a break in between. People go, they do what they have to do, they come back, right? And they watch another movie. That doesn't happen anymore, but what I'm saying is all of this is just so big and historic. There's just no way this goes wrong in any way, shape, or form. If Zack Snyder Justice League goes into theaters, I know, because I have a Facebook group. Plus, I've been in Facebook groups, and people are telling me personally they would go see it. Of course. Okay? And that's of course Snyder fans. But aside from Snyder fans, I can see the average person going just out of curiosity to see it. And there's a lot of people who have not seen this movie yet. So that in and of itself could bring all these people into the theaters and cinemas, and this movie would grow serious money. I mean, serious money. We're talking big time money, because this movie made noise. It made noise amongst the people in the industry and people who know. And then for it to break out and be able to become public information where the public could see it would be incredible. It would be remarkable. And I think this movie would break all kinds of records, because one, it's one of those unicorns out there, right? It wasn't supposed to exist. It came to be. They didn't want it in cinemas. Now it's in cinemas. And the impact of it keeps on building. The more one of us holds back on restoring the Snyderverse, the more they do that, is the more people are like, why? No. And they're not going to let it go, because you see, whether it's a GA or what, they will be like, why? This thing ends in a cliffhanger. Why would you not do a sequel? Like, nobody in their right mind is going to ask you, well, you shouldn't do a sequel. No way. The only crazy people on Twitter, right? And usually they're burner accounts. So they're probably paid by Warner Brothers. So you got to understand, this is not something that anytime soon people are going to just push aside and move on. They're not going to do it, because a lot of people have been to peak DC. Some people think Zack Snyder's work, Christopher Nolan's work, Todd Phillips' work is peak DC. They think it's peak DC. Like, if you want to know what the best DC movies are, you pick those guys, right? Those 3 names I just mentioned. Let's not forget Tim Burton. He was also peak DC, right? When you think about other directors, you don't really think that. So, I mean, Patty Jenkins had a good shot at it, but she's not peak DC because her sequel didn't do well at all. I mean, it flopped. So you can't, you just can't, apples to oranges. So Todd Phillips got his rep. Zack Snyder's got a ridiculous rep. And not only does he have a rep, he has a following, which is even more crazy, because it's like, the more people keep on downing this guy and saying negative things about him, the more they try to show that he's clueless, is the more that he just shows up to be true. He just shows up to be clue. So he's just like he's like the flaming fire in Hollywood right now, and he's not a Hollywood kind of guy. So all of these conflicting things are why this movie would do astonishingly well, because one, it's going to be, I still think this is going to be a very discussed movie. I think it's not going to be as controversial as BVS, but I know if you put it into theaters the way how it is right here and now, you're not doing any Green Lantern scene, none of that, and just put it straight into theaters, I believe without a doubt that this movie would, excuse me, this movie would kill because of the fact that it's like a unicorn. It's like one of those things that doesn't happen, and it's happening, and everybody would want to be a part of that. And the news would travel pretty fast, and it would become something like a Mayweather versus Pacquiao, where this movie would, you know, just really light up the place, and people would just come to just to see the movie, just to be a part of the event. And I'm sure many different people have different opinions about the movie when it's over, but more or less people will more or less be positive about it. So I have no real worries about anything here. I think what's going to play out is going to play out. As I said before, like the lilies of the field, a lot of animals don't work for nothing. They just reap. And I think we're about to get that reaping. You know, the dark, they say the brightest dawn comes after the darkest night. You know what I'm saying? So you can see that things are getting darker and darker, and that's good, because that means what's going to birth out of this is going to be something fantastic and spectacular. I almost forgot. Rebel Moon. Definitely, we need to take it up. We need to really start promoting Rebel Moon in a whole different dimension, a whole different way, because, you know, the strike is still on. The Writers Guild has met probably right now with all the executives and with the AMPTP. So they should have. We should know what kind of progress is happening with that soon enough, if any progress at all. I think that the pressure put on these people, these companies, is starting to have them cave in a little bit. But they're trying to really put pressure on the strikers so that they would wilt, so they'd have more control. And this is not a time for the strikers to wilt. They need to stick to their guns no matter what, because this is a part of history right here. This is a pivotal moment. You can't give up ground. If people need to get work, they need to green light these independent companies that are willing to agree to the SAG-AFTRA rules and just blaze it. Forget the big companies. Big companies can stay there and they can become monoliths if they want. You know, if they don't want to negotiate with the actors can always do it with smaller companies. No problem. Hollywood will move on. You know what I'm saying? So people who can't get work, they need to allow the strikers to work. They're just not working with the AMPTP. That's what they should do. Now, I said I was going to say something else that has to do with Vero. Right? You guys need to join Vero. If you can't join Vero because your phone or whatever, I understand. But there's a lot of people on Vero. Vero is a much more positive platform than Twitter. And you'll also not have people fighting you down and stuff. And you can talk directly to Zack Snyder. So I suggest if Twitter becomes something that you have to pay for, that everybody migrate across to Vero. And I've been on Vero. It's been really nice. Zack Snyder liked Jacob Torres's post, but he did not respond to whether Wonder Woman met the little schoolgirl, if she was something more than, just a schoolgirl. I don't want to go into much more. I know you guys probably know what I'm talking about, but nonetheless. It's been a great time in DC. Nevertheless, in spite of all the flops that have been happening, DC's more going into a comical kind of thing, and it's really not anything I think most of us are interested in. I guess these people are making movies for themselves, not for us anymore. But suffice it to say, like I said before, we don't need to force the issue in terms of trying to get the narrative in our favor. It's already rigged to work in our favor. You see what I'm saying? Zack Snyder is just a hell of a director, and the success of Rebel Moon definitely will make a difference. I do think that Netflix is doing a good thing by investing in Zack Snyder's and Zack Snyder's stuff. So we just keep on pressing. You guys keep on using the hashtags, keep on educating people. There's some things I'm gonna put out there within the next week or so that's really gonna stir up everybody. It's gonna shake up everybody on Twitter, but I'm still doing my homework and research on it. And y'all gonna have I'm gonna have some surprises for you, some goodies. But this is basically what I have to say. Keep on going, guys. You guys are doing a great job with Restore the Snyderverse. Keep the hashtag going. I saw Zack Snyder was trending on Twitter a couple times. We need to expand out again. I'm going to say I right now have TikTok. I also have Facebook. I don't have Instagram, even though I think I have Instagram on one of the phones. Use as much social media as you can and spend some time during your day spreading out some posts on social media concerning either Restore the Snyderverse or whatever. I've been having a good time doing this. I can't lie to you guys. I hope you guys are having a good time as well. And remember, the Most High provides. So you don't have to worry about, what's the situation with DC and stuff like that. What I mean by not worry about it, yes, it's gonna concern you. You're gonna feel a certain way about it, but don't let it weigh you down, bog down your day. Instead, use the fuel within you to do something about it. You have the hashtags, you have AFSAP, or the suicide prevention group in your country. You have, again, we haven't done any, I've put up a couple polls, but we need to have some more competitions, cosplay, etc. Just have some fun. We need to have fun with this. Because this is a great ride and we are not done with it. The ride ain't over yet. So let's have fun with it. Let's have fun as a group, as Snyder fans, as, getting to know each other. I love Will. I like Will Purdy. It's Purdy. It's good to meet him. It's good to meet, it's nice to meet people from the Snyderverse, people who have similar tastes like you. It's really nice to meet them. And we need to not fight amongst each other. If some people are saying selling Snyderverse to Netflix, then even though you might think that it's going to work, always be cordial, always be nice to each other, because guess what? We all pushing for the same thing. So that's what I got for you guys right now. I'm going to get out of here. Oh, my back's itching me a little bit. And I'm going to go check out my plants and stuff and go get something to eat. But in the meantime, I hope and wish you guys a great weekend this weekend. God be with you guys. I'm a Christian, so I'm wishing you guys well that way. And until we meet again with the next stream, peace.